So there is a reckoning that has to happen too with what has happened in your ancestral line, and that you can't pick and choose which parts of it you want to claim.
Ask an auntie oracle what you wanna know. Ask an auntie oracle.
So, hello everyone, Unlearning Fam. We know it's been a minute since we released an episode, and it's because life has been mad lifing, as you probably know. And we have been also building and planting a lot of seeds for upcoming events that we're going to be offering to our community, both in person and online. And today's episode is like the last set of questions that we got from our community event back in January. The topic for today is all about how do we reconnect with our ancestors. Me and Mary talk about this a lot.
A lot.
As
Yeah.
oracles, I feel like the ancestors be talking to me sometimes, even when I'm not even trying to listen.
Woo! They do their own filthy reads too.
Yes,
They do.
they do.
I got a filthy read last night.
And it's also
Yeah.
not always like bad, you
Mm-mm.
know.
No,
There's been times when I was teaching and I can hear my ancestors being like, "Yes, girl, go say that shit to them. We never got to say that shit, or else we would have been killed or tortured, or something would have happened to us if we spoke our truth. And you get to do that now. So say the truth, say what needs to be said." And that gives like an extra for me. So it's not always like they're scolding you, it's also very much their reminder of encouragement for you. So we absolutely love these questions that our community shared and that we'll discuss today. How about you, Mary?
Yeah, I mean, life has really been lifing. And it's so interesting because what I am actually learning in my pathway or my camino as an oracle in service and as a human being with all of these different ancestral lineages is that the going within is really important, really being still, being quiet, whatever that looks like for us. And ironically, I have been back in at home and back to the States from a really intensive experience called the Camino in Santiago de Compostela, and I chose a route in Galicia, which is a particular part of the country of Spain, more on the Atlantic coast, and had no idea that I would connect with ancestry that is not fully human as well. So this is in direct alignment with where I am and the experiences that I've been having,
Yeah,
for sure.
I forgot to mention that. So, similar to Mary, I went back home to the Philippines um, in March and I was there for 3 weeks. I had not been home for 8 years. That's the longest time I've ever been away from my ancestral homelands. And it was a spiritual rejuvenation for me, for sure. It was kind of cute in the sense of it was like an auto ethnographic fieldwork feeling where I'm just like I stayed with my family. I have two siblings who live in the Philippines, and then I have a bunch of friends that I grew up with, and I basically stayed with different people for like 2 to 5 days at a time, and really got to witness their life, witness also the ways that they have progressed and leveled up and glowed up based on when we were and my comparison of course is based off of when we were growing up and I was in the trenches with these people, like poverty and discrimination and just trying to survive every day, and to see my family and friends like their own journeys in real time, um, and also just this refreshing feeling of just feeling like you belong. When you're back in your homeland, the potency of ancestral spirit and energy is so strong. And I feel like in America, I always not just like the stereotype and the messaging of being like this perpetual foreigner, but also just knowing that this is not my homeland. This is not where I'm from. And that there's always something that's pulling me back to go home, and have just that sense of peace of I don't have to prove anything to just exist in a place, or I don't have to be hyper vigilant and discerning if I'm going to be accepted somewhere, which is something I feel every day living in America.
Mm-hmm.
The coming back home is so much part of reconnecting to our ancestral
Mm-hmm.
roots, I think, and finding home
Mm-hmm.
is a huge part of that journey. So let's begin with our questions. So, the first question that was asked, which I will read verbatimly as the person wrote it, is how do I reconnect to my roots and indigeneity when the colonizers were so successful in assimilation and erasure? Go ahead and start, Mary.
So I'm going to push back on that. The colonizers were not. They were not nearly as successful at assimilation and definitely not erasure. I'll start out by saying that, and there are numerous books. There's one that I found, and I can't think of the title and the author offhand right now, that talks about finally kind of Western medicine catching up with what our indigenous ancestors have always known. We are our ancestors, right? This is a concept that is not only specific to, for example, the isiZulu, that is an indigenous tribe to South Africa and is among the Bantu speaking people, but also when we think about the Mayan concept of Inlakesh, right? Tu eres mi otro yo.
Mm-hmm.
And so literally, we embody and we contain in our DNA not only the lineage of our ancestors from as little as 7 generations back, it could be up to 14 generations back. We also literally are imprinted and contain the totality of their experiences. This is in a field called epigenetics that I've kind of talked about before. So, all of the experiences cumulatively, and for me, I know that who my ancestors are, who I am, is beyond the sum is greater, or the whole is greater than just the sum of the parts. And so that's a shorthand answer of we literally physically contain our ancestors. We are our ancestors. And so as a child, I was always intuitively just much more curious about my indigenous lineage on my African side and also my US based native side. Quite frankly, it was like integrated and synthesized in my family in really interesting ways. We're literally living proof that the assimilation has not worked,
Mm.
and we are still here. We are still here. So I'll get into this in another question, because I found this kind of intuitively, but like we are still here. Nobody has been erased. They cannot erase us.
Yep. It didn't work. If anything, like they are literally still trying to do it, but we still here. That's that's the proof. Like they literally tried to eradicate indigenous peoples so that they can steal this land. Um, they might have stolen a lot of this land, but they couldn't annihilate indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples are still here, and they still have a lot of them have claim on their land
Mm.
and are also fighting to get it back, with the land back movements. And if you think about cultural erasure, things like language, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of ways that I feel like we can still tap into indigenous languages. There's a lot of language revitalization movements that I highly encourage people to check out, especially finding out from either your own communities, like where are they teaching, what are the resources that you can learn these languages. I'm going to share, a short version of like my journey of how I reconnected with my roots as someone who's an immigrant. So I was born in the Philippines, but I moved to America when I was 5, right? And when I moved here, all I knew how to do was speak in Tagalog. But once I got into the school system, I was forced to learn English, right? Put into ESL classes, etc. So, yes, like the colonizers set up education institutions to promote, you know, a single language, right? So the enforcement of a single language, i.e., the language of the colonizers, is the assimilation practice. But you can absolutely resist that by practicing, learning, and integrating your own indigenous languages. So growing up here in America, I learned Tagalog from mainly curse words and names of food because that's like when my parents would speak it often. So I can easily associate that. But they didn't want us, whenever I asked my parents, like, about the Philippines or our culture and also our language, they would repeat to me, like, you don't need to learn that. You're in America now. And in order to be successful here, you should learn how to be American, meaning learn more about American culture, values, practices, and the language. So, fast forward when I moved back to the Philippines when I was 13, I now was forced to also learn the Philippine language and Philippine culture. One way I did that was to learn it through the things I already loved, which is music, poetry, any form of art. And the first ways I learned is learning how to, I was like, I was 13, 14 years old trying to find friends and stuff. And I gravitated towards musicians in my class, right? And they would sing like Tagalog songs. And so I started to learn how to speak Tagalog from learning how to play songs on the guitar and singing them. And I know that there's some folks in the community that also learn it through dance, right? Or that's I encourage people to like learn how to tap back into your ancestral cultural practices through things that you already like doing. And I say start there. Your parents are not the only gatekeepers of your culture. There's people in the community that you can reach, and you literally have to go out and seek these people and these resources, but start from where you love. All right. Second question actually connects really well to what we were just talking about in the first question. Question is, how do I live in my ancestral ways when my ancestors come from different lands, cultures, and lifeways? So I was just talking about this. The difference with me is like I understand this question because when I was living here in America as a young person, age 5 to 13, and I would ask my parents, like they actively did not want to teach me because they thought that they were protecting me and they were helping me survive in America by not teaching me, about my own culture, my especially my indigenous culture. So living in and my ancestral ways honestly required me to go back. And if you don't have the capacity or ability to go back to your ancestral lands, I would really seek out the communities here that do offer some kind of way for you to tap in. So I was mentioning earlier, is it through some kind of artistic expression, like music? I joined a Randalia group when I was here in America, and that music group also teaches different dances, like traditional dances from back home. I also really sought out like organizations that promote our indigenous like lifeways in some kind of way, whether it be through like political movements or just through just like community gatherings where people can just hang out together. It's different here, I think, in America for me versus the experiences of reconnecting to my indigenous culture back home, because there is a feeling of you're practicing indigenous ways not in the place you're from. And that's also something to be cognizant of. It's never going to fully feel, I feel like, full, as opposed to if you like really went back to your
Mm-hmm.
indigenous ancestral homelands and live there and experience what it is like to live there, and versus where you're trying to practice it somewhere else. um, but the point is that you're making that active conviction and choice to seek out those resources and those organizations. And again, emphasizing, start with what you already love doing.
Mm.
What do you think, Mary?
I don't have a lot to add to that.
Yeah.
I would say ditto to all of that. And I would say that, it's really challenging to learn an indigenous language because Spanish is not indigenous, it's a conquistadors. English is not indigenous except, right, to those respective European countries. And so I would definitely say start with what speaks to you. Start with like what Maio said, what you already love. Like an example is I've always loved beading.
Mm.
I absolutely love beading across. I didn't even across cultures, and so anywhere I go, one of my main ways of connecting with my own indigenous lineages is as well as appreciating in a way that is not right, really being conscious, intentional, as well as engaging in these cultural practices out of the context of the ancestral land, except when we can go back, even when we're not aware that places are in our ancestral kind of land framework, making sure to do it with a lot of intention so that we're not appropriating it. And so that means looking into it, studying it, not just going and getting something, oh, because that's cute. The other thing I want to stress is everyone has indigenous lineage, including people with a variety of European lineages, many, if not most of whom are not classified as white, like myself. Whiteness is not a thing, it is a construct. And it is one of the most diabolical, evil constructions to me that has ever been created by the human race. So when we're talking about indigeneity, we're not simply talking about Black, Indigenous people of color. We're talking about everyone. And we're talking about all of the lineages that we literally contain within us, dating back to 14 generations and ad infinitum, which, right, is beyond whiteness. Everyone actually comes from indigenous lineages. And so that's what I would stress.
Yeah. And Mary, your response really reminded me of something. It's like when we talk about ancestral, it's very much about lineage. And there is an overlap with that with indigeneity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, your ancestral lineage also
Mm-hmm.
includes the migration pattern
Mm-hmm.
of your family, and really looking into that story and that journey of what happened to bring them here to make you live here too.
Mm.
I think that's something to also emphasize when you're thinking about reconnecting to your ancestral ways, is understanding the journey that your ancestral lineage went through, and to reckon with that, to really sit with that, um, and also start asking people in your family, try
Mm-hmm.
it, like really see what stories come out of that. I wanted to also add this part with the second question, like, how do I live in my ancestral ways? I want to remind people that you are already doing that. You are a continuation of your ancestral line. There is not one way to be, whatever you are. Like, for as many Black people as there are, that's how many ways to be Black. For as many Filipinos as there are, that's how many ways you could be Filipino, right? And so, like, the ways you can live in your ancestral ways, I think, is also for you to remind yourself that you are the current amalgamation of your ancestral lineage. And I think the part of reconnecting is understanding the stories, the journey, the life ways, the lifestyles of your ancestral lineage that brought you to be here and also helped form who you are. uncover those stories,
Mm-hmm.
tap back into those, like that specific journey of your ancestral lineage, because that will help you navigate how you will be a continuation of your ancestors. There's a certain, I think, like responsibility that's part of understanding that story, because you're going to have to reckon with some truths in your ancestral lineage. Not all of your ancestors were holy and just and fair and good people. So there is a reckoning that has to happen too with what has happened in your ancestral line, and that you can't pick and choose which parts of it you want to claim. All of that brought you here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing about ancestral ways. I think that, especially, I'm just going to say it, here, living here in the Western society where people say that they want to like reconnect with their ancestors, they think of it in this like very romanticized notion of like, we were once indigenous and lived in peace and harmony with the earth.
Nope.
And I'm like, no, there was a lot of your ancestors who did some fuck shit, right?
Yeah.
And we're not living in peace and harmony, and that there are things that, because of those choices that they made in their life, that have affected your current disposition. And it's not to blame it, but also to, like, again, reckon with it. So I wanted to make that distinction before we move ahead, because it's not like always this amazing story of like how we were once so
No.
living in this indigenous world. um there was a lot of, if anything, in my personal investigations of this, there was a lot of like cautionary tales of ways that my ancestors had to survive, that I don't agree with some of those choices, but I also understand and have compassion for the context of what they were living through that made them make those choices, right? And that I have to now reckon with the choices I'm also faced with. And I'm gonna tell you right now, a lot of it, it's a cycle. So if my ancestors had to survive colonization to continue our lineage, they had to assimilate to a certain point. And then there's also these ways that they kept their indigeneity, and they had to like go underground with it. And this is how it shows up. And like an example of this is like my dad has such a green thumb. Like I come from an indigenous community that's very agricultural. The Ifugao built the rice terraces, right? And I see that glimmer through my dad when he's around plants. And it's something that he shows to us, that models to us, like this is something we would do back home. We would have home gardens. He doesn't have to specifically say this is an indigenous or ancestral practice, but I can see how this connects him back. And what are those practices that I resonate with? I also like taking care of plants, and I feel that continuation in me. And I also work with what I got, which is something I also learned from my dad. And that sense of resourcefulness, I believe, is an ancestral practice that my ancestors did. We gotta work with what we got. So do you see what I mean by, it's like you gotta reckon with all of it. And that's what I want to share with folks.
Third question.
Alrighty, so the last question is, I have an ancestor or spirit guide intercepting. How do I continue or start to foster a connection with them? What does connecting with my ancestors look like? How do I establish or maintain the connection?
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is, if you already have an ancestor and spirit guide intercepting, you're already connecting. Because just like you were saying, Maio, and how do we connect and kind of revive our ancestral practices? Well, it looks however we look. There's no right or wrong way. This is not about being performative, right? This is not about putting on a costume. And it actually, to me, the key to connecting with our ancestors, our spirit guides, our animal spirits, right? I mean, is to be deeply connected within. Where where are our ancestors? How do we express 14 to 7 to however many generations in here? We are that. So I want to say there's no right or wrong way. And what I have learned is that you invite them. You invite them. For me, the process of connecting with my ancestors has been obviously knowing some of my lineages. And then as time has gone on, being curious, looking into things, asking family members about like the experiences in our family. And also, one thing that I have done over the course of years is look up the meaning of my last name, Rose, which is unique, which means anyone in the world with that last name is related to me, and I'm related to them. And it's one of the oldest surnames in English because it traveled over from the Norse. And I would periodically look it up. And for years, I had known this was back before 2012, like probably closer to 20 years ago. I was in my hometown and I was just like looking around and I saw this. And of course, and I always thought have known that the eagle, like all of this is in us. Like I've always known this, that the eagle is a spirit guide. And then for years, I'm like, well, the wolf, the wolf, the wolf. And I would say for years, I'm not an alpha, I'm not a beta, I'm a wolf, I'm a wolf. And literally years after all of this inner knowing, right, I look up the meaning of my last name, Roth. And it literally means renowned wolf in Norse. It's already within us. It really is. And we have spirit guides, as this question alludes to. We have other lineages. Mm-hmm. I connect with the trees, right? Those are definitely my ancestors. Like I am a wolf, talking about our ancestors, the things that they were pushed to do, and how savage, right, that was in some cases. My ancestors don't want me to go there because they know, because I am their descendant, that I can't. I can be absolutely savage. If you want to know who your ancestors are, I was born as fire. I have always been a fighter. I have always been savage in that way. That's my ancestry. So I'm going to stop there.
Whew. With me, I started very practically in the sense of I noticed my mom always had an altar wherever we lived, and it was a picture of her parents who had already transitioned. So I grew up in a household where a specific space in the house was allotted to your ancestors. And she would burn incense, she would lay down offerings of food, and it would also usually be food that either they really liked, that she knew that they really liked, or like really decadent food, like food you don't have very often. Laying offerings to invite the ancestors to be there by saying like, come be here with us. We have some food for you. And then going to the altar and praying, specifically naming the names of your ancestors and asking them to be with you, and asking them why you want to ask something. Intent. Step one, offering. Step two, intention. Like why are you there? Why are you calling them? Right? And if the ancestor themselves is intercepting, whether through your dreams, that often happens a lot, right? Or maybe you'll hear a voice that you know is not your voice, but you'll hear a voice and that voice is very recognizable. My sister, who transitioned in 2013, be in my ear about shit, and I know how she talks because this is my sister, so I know it's not my voice. And my sister be like, girl, you know what I mean? Do you? Did you die though? Be fucking blessed. Like I know how my sister talks. So there's also when they intercept, they're trying to tell you something. Yeah. and they want you to take heed of it. And it's important for you to recognize and, like Mary said, welcome them in.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming here.
Yeah.
I welcome you here. You're helping guide me. You're helping protect me. You're helping manifest these blessings for me. I want you here with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are some ancestral spirits you do not
You
want
don't.
around.
That's the reckoning. That's the show.
Yeah, because they be trying to show up too.
Woo!
And so when you know it's like, oh, this is the I don't want that energy around me. You also have to confront it and be like, you're not welcome here. I cannot help you. I do not want to receive this message and this task. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. You know what I mean? So it's also a key part of the internal work. You have to know which is your voice, and you have to know when it's someone else's
Know
voice.
thyself. There's no way around it. The beginning and the end of all of these questions of this entire series really nurture the relationship with yourself and reconnect with yourself.
Yeah.
That's really what all of the spirit guides, all of the ancestors really want from us. And in order for us to be able to have a connection with them, we have to know where we end and they begin.
Absolutely.
So
self-awareness, honey. On that note too, I want to plug these upcoming events that Unlearning Community School is doing, which very much aligns to this theme of reconnecting with our ancestors. So we will be having the Balikbayan cooking classes in person in the Bay Area, most likely Oakland. We're still finishing out the details, but the Balikbayan in Tagalog literally translates to return to home or return to homeland. And what better way to do that than through food and learning how to make these ancestral recipes, you know, from any community in diaspora. You don't have to be Filipino to join because there's a lot of similarities and parallels. I just want to do the plug of the first cooking class is probably going to be how to make lumpias. And I know y'all love them lumpias, so you can go join us and learn how to make it. And I'm going to share my ancestral stories of it was my mother who taught me how to make lumpias. And so that's one. We're also going to have Balikbayan drop-in classes where we're going to have guest speakers who are indigenous, have indigenous lineage, or work with indigenous communities in solidarity. And it's going to be online, and it's just a conversation of stories of our journeys, of our lineage, and connecting back with our ancestral roots. So that's the second one to look for, Balikbayan drop-in classes. And the third is we're working with Reno Consulting Solutions, Raynell Reno, and we're going to be doing Trailheads to Healing. That's the event. And we're going to be connecting with our more than human ancestors, nature's elements, going on a hike together. So we hope that you can join us, and we will see you very, very soon. Thanks, y'all.
Hey.
Ask an auntie oracle what you want to know. Ask an auntie oracle.
I'm still recording, so Anka will hear this.
Okay. these obviously, because we've got to get beyond whiteness and everything else. And so they're the main ones who think they don't have culture. They're not. No, bitch, you're indigenous to somewhere too.
Yeah.
Like, and the migration pattern.
Yeah.
And then that's the colonization. And then people are like, no, Mexico is not native to California. While California was a part of Mexico, it traded hands between 3 colonial states. Spain, then Mexico, then the US. So that's not a flex. People need to stop saying that. And just because you're indigenous, no, there are people indigenous to California that are not Mexican indigeneity, because too many Latinos are actually usurping actual US-based native. And we need to use the terms, because if we gloss over, that is super, super problematic. And it's like, it is the details and the specificities that are important with the lineages and how our families came to be here and the positioning of them, depending on, are you California native? Are you US based natives? Are you on a reservation? Or did you come from south of the border, where none of, like, those governments don't even acknowledge indigeneity. They don't even acknowledge their actual indigenous people.
Yeah.
So I'm just wanted to get that off my chest.
Say that.